there are people in your life that just aren't going to change. I hate to say it, but you're not going to be able to change that person all that much. If you carry that burden that you have to be the one to really make a wave, then you're really just fighting somewhat of a losing battle. What's up, y'all? THECODYALLEN here with episode number God knows what of the Fill the Gap podcast. I guess we'll just call it the latest and greatest episode because it seems like everyone we do gets better, according to YouTube. More people watch them. I guess that means something. And today is beginning of April. Beginning of April means that it's the end of Q1, beginning of Q2. And for most people, especially people in the business world, that just means like, how do we start off the year? Not even just business people, just people in general. I think that we always have that like, not motto, but on the daily basis, will try to focus on the tasks that are right in front of us and not look at the big picture. And before you know it, the whole year slips by. Something that I've tried to focus on, definitely from like a goal setting standpoint. I definitely want to make sure that I am breaking each year, quarter, month, week, day down, and so what I'm trying to say is, did I hit all my Q1 goals? No. But you adjust, you make things right. And one of the goals of this quarter was to do more of these podcasts. So we're knocking them out one a week. We'll call it a version of self-help, definitely something that has helped me work through some of my feelings, work through some of the things that I talk to people about. Helps me stay up to date with shit that's going on. And I guess that kind of brings me into the main subject that I want to talk about today. Prior to that, and get a little ahead of myself. As you guys know, always these podcasts are sponsored by Cuts. Cuts is men's clothing brand. They make the best shirts in the game. I wear them every single podcast, every single day to work, every single just day in general when I'm out and about, hanging out with friends, not doing anything. I spend a lot of time at my house. So even when I'm just lounging around at my house, I'm wearing Cut shirts if I'm wearing a shirt. So I'll link it down below, but use the code THECODYALLEN. You guys get a discount. You guys get plugged with all the latest and greatest. They have new drops every Friday. So listen to the podcast on Wednesday, get new clothes on Friday. It's like it can be your thing. Anyway, there is just so much shit going on in the world today. And there's always just shit going on. But this is a social media / media driven world, especially living in America. I don't know what it's like in other countries. I think they just kind of look at us and laugh about the shit that we do. But so much is just put out there, sensory overload every single day. And a lot of it, at least the shit that gets clicks, right? It is a shit that is going to just overload your dopamine receptors and the shit that's going to make you anxious as fuck. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today was caring about the shit that you actually have control over. I just started reading, and when I say I just started reading, I'm like 15 pages into the book, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And I didn't know what it was about. Tons of people have recommended it always, like, oh, you got to read this book, you got to read this book. I was like, I don't know, it's too trendy. I didn't want to be like, oh, I'm just reading because other people want me to read it, or because people like post it on Instagram or whatever the hell it is. But it's an easy read. I'm not a heavy reader, so easy reads are good for me. And I'm liking it. I like any sort of like philosophical book. And this book specifically kind of put so many things in perspective, at least the first 15 pages or so, has put so many things in perspective into what we actually give our energy to, what we actually give our mind to, our emotions to. I guess I'll bring it to the sports world. I talked in a podcast before about sometimes just things not being a good fit. Sometimes things aren't compatible. In particular sports, in particular games like football, sometimes you get put onto a team that it's just not a good fit. It just isn't going to work out for one reason or another. And that's somewhat out of your control, right? But when you work your whole life to get to a certain level of play, just so you get the opportunity to play, and maybe the play book that you're playing in or the offense that you're playing in isn't geared towards making you the most successful receiver you could be, right? I played option quarterback in high school, and there were a ton of good receivers that went to my high school that never saw the field, number one, never saw the receptions or the targets that they needed to because it just wasn't geared towards them. Getting too technical, but what I'm trying to say is that sometimes you can't control the things that ultimately have a massive impact on how you are feeling about things. This translates directly over into work, relationships, the world, your community, your friendships, and the way that social media is specifically set up is that they're just putting shit out there that is there to trigger you. Literally, the most controversial topics are put out there because they want you to click, they want you to comment, they want you to do all of this shit. And there are so many people out there that suffer with anxiety that, I don't say suffer with anxiety, I mean everybody's anxious, right? Different levels of anxiousness. I guess anxiety is a noun. Nonetheless, so many people out there that they'll see some shit and it will absolutely trigger them, set them over the edge. And in reality, it has nothing to do with them. They feel like they are compelled to sort of give a shit about this because everybody else is giving a shit about it. That's when you loop in the virtue signaling, you loop in the Facebook filters. Remember that was the thing, you know? People that have never been to Paris but are crying online because of the massacre or whatever, the truck driver that was over in Paris. People that had never been to Russia, Ukraine, and it's been a massive thing, especially in America today, you know? And it's one thing to show empathy. It's another thing to let this actually affect you. I've had friends in my life that they can't get out of bed because they're like, oh my God, like what's going to happen to us? What are we going to do? And on the macro scale, when you're looking at things like on social media, right? Like, oh my God, like what's happening with the economy? Like, what are we going to do? Like, should I even be working? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And we can talk about the whole last 2.5 years in living in America, which has just gone away, which is just everything's fine now that there's no cases of anything. But there were so many people that were just stuck because they felt handcuffed by particular situations. There are people who cannot live their life, people that choose not to live their life because they are just crippled by a lot of the things that they're just made aware of that they ultimately can't do a shit about. Now, in the event that you do want to become, what is it? I don't know. If you do want to be proactive and do something about it, all right, cool. Let's find a way to do it, because then if your efforts aren't met and that causes some sort of trigger, or that triggers some sort of anxiety or depression, then you can be like, all right, cool. Like, I'm feeling anxious about this or depressed because what I'm doing isn't working. Now that's one thing, right? But as we look at this on the macro scale, just the shit that people get hounded with on social media consistently and are forced to act like they give two shits about it, and they trick themselves into thinking that they actually care about it. It's kind of fucking crazy. Talked about what it looks like on the macro scale, right? That's the social media, that's all of this. But on the micro scale, that is dealing with these things in your relationship. That is dealing with these things in your friendships, in your family. a lot of times when dealing with parents or family members that, I don't know, they're 40, 50 years old, 60 years old. And there are a lot of people who get so caught up on how their parents act towards them, how their parents treat them, how their parents just are in general, that it really gets to them. And I hate to say it, but in reality, you're not going to be able to change that person all that much. If you carry that burden that you have to be the one to really make a wave, and you got to try to change your mom from being neglectful your entire life, or change your dad from being stern, stubborn, and it just a hypocrite maybe, and it really just gets to you, then you're really just fighting somewhat of a losing battle. It's different if you're dealing like with somebody who suffers from alcoholism and you want to make a meaningful, impactful change in their life. But a lot of times there are people in your life that just aren't going to change. If you bring this back to like the relationship level, I say the whole point of this is not caring about things, or not letting them affect you. Rather, things affect you so much that you don't have control over. You can just go and talk like relationships. There are people who are hanging on to relationships with a guy who has beat them up a ton of times, with a guy who verbally, mentally, physically abuses them, whatever it is, because they feel like they shoulder the burden of changing that person, or I see him for a different type of person that he is. And in reality, it's so convoluted in regards to like what you should care about in that facet. But in reality, it's not on you, and you can't shoulder that burden. You can't make that your trigger to make you more anxious, more depressed. Vice versa. If you're with a girl that doesn't give a shit about you, if you're with a girl that kind of has always put herself before you, if you're with someone that just you don't align with, and it's just constantly hounding you and constantly making you feel like you're walking on eggshells, if you constantly feel like you're inadequate in any way, like I said, you can't care about things that you don't have control over. You do have control over whether you're in that relationship or not. You don't have control over how that person treats you. Ultimately, that's on them. You can tell them till you're blue in the face that you want to be treated at X, Y, and Z. But if you continue to accept a certain way of treatment, you're essentially telling them that you really don't give a shit how you're treated. I know we started big. We brought it back down home. And it's the same thing when it comes to your friends. It's the same thing when it comes to putting yourself into situations with people that aren't on the same path as you, and trying to keep up with people that aren't on the same path as you, especially for guys. One of the things that guys do worse than anybody else is we try to compete in shit that we ultimately don't care about. I used to go out all the time, and I would try to, for lack of a better term, like peacock in different ways, and just tried to make myself feel something, number one, but number two, feel like wanted, feel like I meant something. And I was doing it in ways that I didn't care about, that other people didn't care about, but social media told me otherwise. Social media, and I'm not blaming anybody, it's on me, but on social media, you can craft and curate this really fabricated life, you know? That was like my bout with this whole thing, letting something that was so insignificant impact me on such a massive and grand scale. And people are doing it every single day. And so reading this book really made me think about how so many of the things that we try to aspire to be in life, so many of the things we try to aspire for, to get things, people we try to impress, are things that we just really need to cut loose. Because ultimately when you get them, when you get the money, the girls, the cars, the fame, the houses, all that shit, it's not going to make you as happy as you thought. It'll make you happy for sure, but it's not going to make you as happy as you thought. And that will go ahead and trigger a whole new set of depression, because you're like, why'd I throw away valuable relationships? Why'd I throw away the girl that maybe was the good one that I should have settled with? Why'd I throw away the guy that was the good one that I should have settled with, but I started dating the famous guy, or you know what, whatever it might be. And you're going to be lonely. And all of these things that I talked about before, if you don't make the proper adjustments, you just end up feeling super fucking lonely in the end. I know a lot of people who have gotten there. I personally haven't myself, but it's a path that it's super fucking easy to get down, because the way that it is celebrated in society, in the media, makes it so that we work so hard towards something that we probably don't even really want in the long term. So that is my roundabout way of saying don't do dumb shit. But yeah, you guys know the deal. Pretty sure this is episode number 10. We'll keep rolling them out, keep on bringing guests. If there's somebody that you guys want to see on the podcast, tag them down below, and let's keep this thing rolling. Follow me on all my channels and my website, TheCodyAllen. That's it.